The phone call came at 3:15 a.m., and in those first few seconds, I thought it was a mistake, something I had imagined in the haze of sleep. I never expected him to be the one to call me, the one who had slipped through the cracks of my life like water through fingers, leaving behind no trace of his existence in the waking world. He wasn't supposed to be a part of my story, not anymore. The months had passed since our last conversation, and I had convinced myself that everything had ended, that everything had been nothing more than a fleeting moment of too much longing and not enough understanding. But his voice shattered the silence of my darkened room, a sound I hadn't realized I'd been desperately waiting to hear again. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice trembling just enough to make me sit up straight. "I thought I understood what it meant to have your heart break over someone, but I was wrong. The real pain, the one that feels like it's slowly suffocating you, didn't come when he walked away. No, it came when he decided to come back. The moment he spoke, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I didn't understand it then, but I know now. This was the moment everything changed. I need to see you," he added, his words carrying a weight that made my pulse quicken. And just like that, the night spiraled out of control. No matter how much I tried to fight the pull, no matter how I begged myself to stay calm, I could feel it in my bones. I was falling again, and there was no way out this time. He was back, and he was coming for me. The drive to the place he'd told me to meet him at felt like it stretched on forever. The streets, empty and shadowed by the faint glow of streetlights, blurred past my car window as my mind raced. Every inch of me was torn between fury and longing, and it was impossible to distinguish which one felt stronger. Fury, because I had spent so long convincing myself I was better off without him, without his chaos, without his sudden silences that left me questioning everything. But longing, because no matter how much I tried to bury it, no matter how many times I had told myself I was moving on, there was still a part of me that craved him. And that part was screaming now, louder than any rational thought I could muster. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I approached the familiar old diner on the edge of town, the one where we had spent hours talking and laughing until our words lost meaning, and only the warmth between us remained. But this time, it felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, as though something had shifted in the universe. I pulled into the parking lot, my heart pounding, and there he was, standing by the door as if he had been waiting forever. But when I saw him, I froze. The man standing there wasn't the one I had known, the one I had kissed goodbye with tears that I had long since wiped away. This was someone different, someone who wore the weight of 1,000 untold stories in his eyes, someone who looked as if he had been living a life I could never have imagined. "I know you're angry," he said softly as I got out of the car, his voice trembling, but it wasn't just from guilt, it was fear. "But you need to understand I didn't come back for you. I came back for me." The words hit me like a slap, unexpected and completely out of left field. He wasn't here for me. He wasn't here to fix what was broken between us. He wasn't here to apologize, at least not in the way I thought he would. He was here because something inside of him had cracked open, something that had nothing to do with me. But I couldn't walk away. I couldn't walk away because in that moment, I realized that I was just as broken as he was, just as lost, just as desperate to find something to hold on to, even if it meant holding on to a past that should have stayed buried. The truth was, he wasn't stealing my heart back. He was pulling me into the wreckage of his. We sat across from each other in the dim corner booth of the diner, and the silence between us felt like it could swallow us whole. The faded neon sign outside cast a dull, pinkish hue over his face, making him look almost otherworldly, like a ghost from a past I wasn't ready to face. I kept my eyes fixed on the cracked menu in front of me, but every part of my body was hyper-aware of him, of his presence, of the way his fingers twitched nervously around his coffee cup. For a moment, I almost wanted to laugh at how absurd this situation was, how strange it felt to be here with him again after everything. But there was nothing funny about it. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of what I might say, terrified of what I might feel, but most of all, terrified of how quickly everything between us could unravel again. "I never wanted to hurt you," he finally spoke, and his words were softer than I remembered, more fragile than before. But it wasn't just the words that got to me. It was the way he said them, like they were tearing him apart to even admit it. I wanted to scream at him for leaving, for coming back without any explanation, for breaking my heart and then asking me to pick up the pieces. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't even look him in the eye. Because in the deepest part of me, a part I couldn't explain or control, I was still in love with him. Then why now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why after all this time? He hesitated, his gaze drifting to the window as if the answer could be found in the dark night outside. "Because I couldn't live with myself anymore," he confessed. "I spent so long running from what we had, from the truth, from everything. But it never stopped. I thought it would fade, that I could forget, but I can't." And that's when it hit me, the twist I hadn't expected, the one that threw everything I thought I knew about us into disarray. "I was never the one you were running from," I said, the realization hitting me like a freight train. He froze, his eyes wide, as if he hadn't planned on me catching on so quickly. "You were running from yourself." And that was when the world tilted. In the pause that followed, I could feel my own heart beating in my throat. This wasn't about us anymore. It was about something far deeper, something I wasn't ready to understand. And suddenly, everything I thought I knew about him felt like it was a lie, or at least, it was a version of him I hadn't known. A version that was more broken than I ever could have imagined. But I couldn't walk away, not this time. The person I had once loved, the person I thought I had lost forever, was sitting in front of me, not because he wanted to fix us, but because he was finally ready to face what he had been running from. And maybe, just maybe, we could face it together. The conversation lingered in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating, but neither of us seemed willing to break the silence that followed. I could feel the weight of his words pressing against me, and in some strange way I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that this wasn't just another version of his usual escape act, another fleeting moment where he came into my life and left me more tangled than before. But something about the way he spoke, the vulnerability in his voice, told me this was different. I wanted to reach out and touch his hand, to close the distance between us, but the fear still clung to me, a silent barrier that kept me from taking the leap. What if he left again? What if this time it wasn't just about running from himself? What if the thing he was afraid of the most was me, my love, my need for him? "Do you love me?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. It wasn't the question I had intended to ask, but the moment was too heavy, too raw for anything else. And somehow, I knew it was the only question that mattered. His eyes flickered to mine, and for a moment the world outside seemed to disappear. The noise of the diner, the clink of silverware, the hum of conversations fading into the background, all I could hear was the soft rasp of his breath. And then he said it. "I don't know." My heart stopped. The answer was both everything and nothing at all. He didn't know. He didn't know if he loved me, if he ever had, or if what he was feeling now was just the aftermath of years of tangled emotions and lost chances. The truth was, it wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the one I needed. I couldn't force him to love me. I couldn't make him feel something that wasn't there. But in that moment, I realized something that sent a chill through my entire body. He wasn't the one who had stolen my heart. I had given it to him, piece by piece, and it was never really about whether he loved me or not. It was about how much of myself I had left in him, how much of me had been left behind in the spaces between us, in the quiet moments that no one else could see. And that was the twist I hadn't been ready for. The truth that had been staring me in the face all along. He hadn't stolen my heart. I had handed it to him, and it was in his hands, always had been. But now, as I sat across from him, I had to decide if I could take it back, if I was ready to reclaim the pieces of myself that he had taken with him all those years ago. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, a cold realization settled over me. I wasn't just sitting in a diner with him anymore. I was confronting the very essence of everything I had tried to bury. My heart, what was left of it, was still tangled in his mess. And in that mess, I saw the reflection of myself, broken and bruised but still clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, we could fix everything that had shattered between us. But the truth was, we were never going to fix it. We were two broken people, and no amount of apologies or unspoken confessions could erase the years of damage. Yet I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Not this time. Because I had learned something in that moment, something I had never considered before. He had never stolen my heart. He had merely been the catalyst for me to discover that I had given it away, piece by piece, over the years. And now, in the quiet, unspoken space between us, I realized that I had the power to take it back. But it wasn't going to be easy. It was never going to be easy. And that's when it happened, when the moment broke wide open and I understood what had been missing from the entire equation. He didn't need me to fix him, and I didn't need him to fix me. We had spent so long trying to save each other that we forgot the most important thing. We needed to save ourselves first. And so I made a choice. A choice that wasn't born of desperation or longing but of clarity. I stood up from the booth, my heart still raw but for the first time not broken. "I think we're both lost," I said, my voice steady, even though the words felt like an anchor pulling me deeper into the truth. "And maybe we need to stay lost. To figure out who we are when we're not tangled up in each other." He didn't argue. He didn't say anything at all. He simply looked at me with those eyes, those haunted eyes that had once held so much promise. And in that silence, something shifted, something real. For the first time, I understood that the day he stole my heart wasn't the day I let him back into my life. It was the day I stopped waiting for him to love me the way I wanted to be loved. The day I realized that my heart wasn't his to take anymore. It was mine, and it always had been.